Hi, everyone. I'm citizen spokeswoman Ruth Wasserman Lande. Today, September 3rd, 2024. This is the daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. We are live on Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and available afterwards wherever you get your podcasts. Please start submitting questions in the chat, and as always, like and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. Today is day 333 of the October 7th war. Let's get right to the point. Israel's prime minister said last night, Hamas rejected every hostage release deal since November 2023. Don't take Israel's word for it. On April 27th, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken had said Israel made an extraordinarily generous offer. On May 31st, Israel agreed to a US-backed proposal. Hamas refused. On August 16th, Israel agreed to an American final bridging proposal. Hamas refused. On August 19th, Secretary Blinken said Israel accepted the US proposal. Now Hamas must do the same thing. On August 21st, US Deputy CIA head said, Israel shows seriousness in the negotiations. Now, Hamas must show the same seriousness. Does anyone think that Hamas wants to release the hostages? Hamas is executing hostages. What is the proper response to this? Is it to pressure Israel? That just doesn't make sense. If you pressure Israel, you're telling Hamas that its strategy is working. You're telling Hamas, don't concede anything. Execute more hostages. We need massive pressure on the hostage takers. We need massive pressure on Hamas and massive pressure on Hamas backers. Qatar, Turkey, Iran. We need massive pressure now before it's too late. It's very nice that the world leaders are saying, Hamas must release our hostages. But without world leaders acting, there is no reason for Hamas to listen. Tell your leaders, give Hamas and Qatar, Turkey and Iran a reason to listen. Don't just say hostages should be released, act to make them do it. I'm sorry to say, but the United Kingdom made a terrible decision. The UK suspended 30 arms export licenses to Israel. This decision now, when Hamas is executing our hostages, sends a terrible message to Hamas and to terrorists in general. It simply tells Hamas, hey guys, terror works. If you continue holding hostages, if you continue trying to murder Israeli children while hiding behind your own children, hey, the UK will deny Israel's ability to defend itself. It's obscene. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy rightly said that Hamas does not care at all about international humanitarian law. You'd think that he would take steps to pressure Hamas, right? But instead, he said that the UK must assess Israel's compliance with international law, a decision that is detached from reality as Israel fights a barbaric enemy in densely populated areas. The UK says Hamas is bad, but it acts to punish Israel. The UK should stand with Israel, a fellow democracy defending itself simply against barbarism, in word and in deed. In his address to Parliament, Secretary Lammy spoke several times about Israel's right to self-defense, but his action is to deny Israel the tools it needs to defend itself. This isn't just about Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Lamy highlighted threats to Israel from Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon, and that UK fighter jets helped blunt Iran's massive missile attack on Israel in April. Now, he said that the UK would deny important components for Israel's fighter aircraft, helicopters, and drones. Remember, Hamas is still holding over 100 hostages, including 5 British citizens. The UK withholding arms from Israel emboldens Hamas and the entire Iranian ring of fire that surrounds Israel. We must all resist Hamas's psychological warfare. Let's be clear. Hamas is demanding a ransom. We need the world to pressure it to reduce that ransom. Pressure Hamas and its backers, Iran, Qatar, and Turkey, to release the hostages now. Don't forget that terrorism knows no borders. It will not stop with Israel. The threat is already more than obvious in London and elsewhere in the West. Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
This question is from Marjorie on our Instagram Live. Will Israel start to become more self-sufficient with weapon production in light of this news from the UK?
Thank you, Marjorie. First of all, Israel should become more self-sufficient. This is absolutely besides the point of whether the UK sends an embargo or enacts an embargo or other countries do as well. It's always a preferred path. However, with or without the UK, Israel will, please God, defeat its enemies simply because it has no other choice. But I do want to say one thing. The UK is making such a wrong decision, not because I'm on Israel's side, but simply because there's no other way to look at it. Because radical Islam, extremism, and terrorism does not know any borders. In fact, you can see it in broad daylight in the entire Europe and in the streets of London. You see the mass prayers on the street stopping the traffic, while there are very many mosques in the city and elsewhere in the UK. You see many fights, physical fights between radical Islamists, extremists, terrorists, and simple Brits. It's got nothing to do with Jews. You see many people from abroad, Islamist extremists, treating their women in London, in the UK, in an improper manner, unacceptable to Western values. You see that encroaching the West all the time. And the Islamists and the extremists say clearly that their vision is to occupy Europe, to occupy Rome. They name this particular city. That's part of the vision. It's part of the actual playing out of the end of times that they believe in. And they're acting upon it. It's going to come to your doorstep in a minute.
Ed Barr on YouTube is asking if you can comment on the documents that the IDF recovered in Gaza that show Hamas manipulated the public opinion polling of Khalil Shukaki, and anything that you can add about public opinion among Palestinians in general about Hamas and this war.
So the word Hamas and the word manipulation are, I would say, rather interestingly, synonymous. In fact, manipulation is the art of psychological warfare. This is what Hamas is best at. It learned it originally from the Soviets, the Nazis, but it perfected the art. That's what it does brilliantly. It edits videos, it sends messages trying to formulate the public opinion, first and foremost within the Gaza Strip itself, of course, to manipulate the minds of the people, to indoctrinate them. You cannot speak against Hamas. This message is being heard, or was being heard, prior to the IDF entering the Gaza Strip, in the mosques, at the schools, everywhere one can hear. You could not have another opinion. So basically, the word is brainwashing. Now, why is it important that this particular poll was being manipulated, because we should not forget that the arch enemy of Hamas is not Israel, nor is it the Jewish people or the West. All of these are enemies of Hamas, indeed. But first and foremost, it's the Fatah. It's the Palestinian Authority, which has a completely different way of looking at life and leading the Palestinian people. In fact, they're arch enemies. And this is why they try to manipulate the poll to show that there's a preference to Hamas rather than to a different Palestinian leadership in the Gaza Strip.
So the question from our YouTube live, people have suggested that Israel should leave the Philadelphia corridor as part of a hostage deal, saying it can simply go back in afterward. How realistic is it that Israel could re-enter? Could you put this issue of the Philadelphia corridor in context for people watching from abroad?
Sure. So it's a bit of a complicated issue, although at the end of the day, for me, in my humble opinion, it's black and white. Some people say that it's easy to go back afterwards. But you know, the Hamas are not completely idiotic. They would want security and promises by the international arena that Israel would not go back to the Philadelphia line. So I'm not 100% sure that saying that it can easily go back to the Philadelphia line is something that we can count on, at least not in the immediate future. Why is the Philadelphia line so important? Because it is the lifeline for the Hamas in terms of the tunnels going under the Philadelphia line, separating the Gaza part of Rafah and the Egyptian part of Rafah. And if the Egyptians allow it and turn a blind eye for a myriad of reasons, and if you want, I can go into it later, but for a myriad of reasons, turn a blind eye and allow the continuation of the smuggling without Israel being at the Philadelphia line, making sure that this doesn't happen, in 1 year, the Hamas is going to be up to its nose in weapons once again. And what is it going to do? It told us what it's going to do. It's going to do the October 7th attack, rape, massacres, murders, carnage all over again and again and again. So we need to prevent them while they still exist, and the Islamic Jihad and the other terrorist groups within the Gaza Strip from getting more weapons to kill their own people and make them miserable as they do, and of course to kill Israelis.
Question from our Instagram live, does Israel feel hampered by the upcoming US elections?
Well, the US elections are very important. In fact, US and the US-Israel relationship, the strategic relationship between the two countries is vastly important for the country in terms of security, in terms of shared values, in terms of people to people and cooperation on a number of issues, not only the security related ones. Hence, the actual results of the elections have a critical effect, because there are very big differences between the candidate on the Republican side and the candidate on the Democratic side. And their views, although they try sometimes on the Democratic side to say that their views on Israel and its security are similar to the Republican side, there are significant differences, and therefore it makes a huge difference. So this is a key issue for Israel and Israeli policy. But also, friends, we need to take into account that for many Arab countries in the region, this makes a huge difference. For example, to the members of the Abraham Accords who look to the United States in terms of the possibility of enhancing those accords, making them stronger, reenacting them, and enhancing them in other countries as well, for example, like in Saudi Arabia. And they are very afraid of a weakened American administration because they saw what had happened in Iraq, they saw what had happened in Afghanistan, and they don't want to rely on a superpower that's going to not stand up for them security-wise, particularly with the threat of Iran upon other countries in the region. And therefore, there will be tremendous repercussions to the elections and their results on Israel, on its neighbors, and the general geostrategy and the policy regarding it in this region.
Our final question today comes from Rachel on Instagram, who writes, Hamas supporters in the West have grown louder. How do we as Jews in the West protect ourselves and educate the blind followers?
So first of all, I would suggest that you listen to us on the daily briefing every day, but also to educate yourselves with listening to Israeli news, to other news that you find are responsible, not those who say that Israeli civilians, hostages, were found dead simply out of the blue. Whoops, a kind of a surprise, found in the middle of the day, dead. No, they were murdered, they were executed, they were taken out by Hamas terrorists. This is the correct information. You need to look and choose. I don't want to choose for you the correct information and read as much as you can. There are lots of think tanks. There are FDD, there's Misgav, there's INSS. There are different bodies that analyze what is going on in the geostrategy of the region. And you can be active as well. You can write to your Congress people. You can get impact. People who have a lot of influence in the media, actors, people who have influence in the social media, to act upon what is right. I'm talking about those who have courage, courage to say the truth, courage to stand up perhaps against what is the most popular opinion, which is currently, for some unknown, ridiculous, obscene reason, pro-Hamas. But no, the truth will come out. It will come out and be on top, because that's what happens always. And this is what I believe you, as people who care, need to educate yourselves on, and furthermore, act upon, write and talk about to people who want to listen. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this time with us, and we hope to see you tomorrow live at 3 p.m. Israel time with us again. Thank you.